The European Union's digital COVID certificate or the Green Pass has generated a fair bit of controversy for what is being seen as vaccine discrimination. Well, for starters, we all know that Covishield was not included as a vaccine that would be valid, legitimate for traveling to countries in Europe, to the European Union countries. And this is something that even Adar Poonawalla has taken up at the highest levels. But this isn't the only issue where the European Union is being rigid as far as COVID vaccines are concerned. What are the other pain points? Why is the EU being so rigid? These are the questions that Noinama Basu, who tracks diplomacy for The Print, will help us answer in this live episode of Government Matters. Noinama, really, I mean, the big question is, why is the EU being so rigid on COVID vaccines? But before that, to begin with, let's talk a little bit about the Green Pass, what has been the controversy surrounding it. And now there have been some EU countries that have allowed Covishield.
Well, that's right, Ruhi. I mean, not just the European Union, but Europe as such, many European countries, some that are not even part of European Union. There was this, there is this green pass that you need, which is basically their digital certificate. It comes in digital format or in a paper format, which will give you the name of approved vaccines with which you can travel to the EU, Europe, or any other European countries within the European Union region. Now, the question is, yes, we are hearing for the last, since yesterday, that maybe some 9-11 countries have approved Covishield. Some, like Estonia, also will allow Covaxin and Covishield. However, the question really is, these countries have not really officially commented so far with any of their statements that yes, they'll allow. And there are these regulations that you need to carefully follow, that the Schengen visa rules, lay out. So, like, for example, Switzerland. Now, while we are all thinking that yes, and there is this thing that we have heard from sources, the information that Covishield will be allowed, if you go to the Schengen visa website, it still says that, it has not yet been allowed officially. A statement has not come in from the Swiss government. And so while you apply for the visa, your Schengen visa, that can definitely get stuck because, unless there is this communication that comes down officially at the levels where you get the visa. So it has become a very complex issue. So that's basically the Green Pass is that you would need to come from a country which does not fall in the high risk category. Now, we very well know that India has become under that category, unfortunately, because of the Delta variant, Delta Plus variant, which have been called largely the virus of concern, although the WHO does not label it like that. However, there is this second criteria in that Green Pass, that you have to be fully vaccinated with the approved vaccine that have been approved not by only by the WHO, but also by the European Medicines Agency, which is the EMA. So, so after all this controversy started, and we saw Mr. Poonawalla of Serum Institute tweeting about it, the EMA officials, their representative gave we saw an interview in the BBC stating that, you need to apply for EMA approval separately as well, which I think Serum will now be doing. And, companies are waking up to the fact that this is a separate approval that you would need to do probably when you have to travel to Europe.
Right. Now, of course, the Green Pass has become a bit of a sort of contentious issue. But as I mentioned earlier, there are other friction points as far as EU and vaccines are concerned. So let's talk a little bit about them, Noinama.
From very first, when, India sort of had a huge jolt coming in terms of the second wave, and there was this criticism that why is India carrying out its vaccine Maitri, which is the where India was granting exports as vaccines as exports and also as grants. There was this thing that India stopped giving it to the neighboring countries, and other countries it was sending, but nevertheless India did send a large amount of shipment to several countries across the world, of course including to a large extent the maximum chunk went in the neighborhood. Now, so while this criticism was coming in, we were hearing from the government also, from the External Affairs Ministry and otherwise, that why is the EU sitting on this stockpile of vaccines, the fact that, there are these mixed statements coming out, even from COVAX, that, some countries are not really adhering to the pledge they are giving, right? So we know that the Europe has announced donation of some $1 billion in COVAX. There was this thing also about, the vaccines that they'll give, like America has just announced. Now, these countries, I mean, the European countries, America, they've been smart enough to take a step that, okay, let's vaccinate our people fully, at least reach a 90% level, and then we'll start giving. So that's another aspect of it. But we're also hearing from African Union and countries like that. I mean, yesterday, African Union Special Envoy for Vaccines, he sort of came down very heavily on the European countries that, he's even blamed that the European countries are not meeting their COVAX commitments. Neither, and these were his exact quotes, I've written it down, that not one dose or not one vial has left a European factory for Africa. So, this is one aspect of the African Union. Now, the entire continent. Now, let's come to the fact that India and South Africa are also fighting for a proposal of, waiving intellectual property, IPR, rights and patents from COVID vaccines, so that they become, the accessibility part of it, the affordability part of it, that becomes key. Because if you have IPR, heavy IPR laws on them, they not only the vaccines become costly, you also the access part becomes impacted. So we've seen even that when India and South Africa floated that proposal in October 2020, the maximum resistance came from European Union. They questioned the fact that why do you need a TRIPS waiver, which is how it is called at the WTO, the Trade-Related Intellectual Property Rights Agreement. So why do you need a TRIPS waiver? We can go ahead and look at other alternative mechanism. Let's make it equitable distribution can be achieved in certain other ways also. So and then we saw eventually the Biden administration also agreeing to the fact that, okay, maybe not COVID vaccines, maybe not COVID therapeutics or medicines, but for vaccines at least, let's have a TRIPS waiver. Let's at least negotiate it at the level of the WTO within all the members. But the European Union was opposed even on that as well. So
Right.
the fact that, there's this little things that are now that have piled up. India has also started questioning that why is it that European Union is doing that, which is why we saw, earlier this week, the government coming up with a statement that if you do not allow, then there'll be, reciprocation will get impacted. So if you allow Covishield and Covaxin, we'll then allow, relax the quarantine rules.
Right. So, Noinima, this brings us to the crux of this discussion. Why is the EU being so rigid on so many fronts? And as you mentioned, these were individually small things, but they've all snowballed into one big controversy.
So, if you follow European media, various countries, they have had their second wave and third wave, right? Germany has also suffered a lot in the third wave. So the fact is, Europe has become very concerned with the fact that how much will it be able to vaccinate its own people? And all these mutant varieties that are coming up, for the coronavirus, how will they be able to tackle it? Whether every vaccine will be fruitful or effective. Then they're also looking at giving it to the teenagers. So which is why they are not really distributing it as, countries were expecting them to do so. But, going forward, you never know. The G7 made a pledge that there will be vaccine distribution, a large chunk of which will be coming out from the European countries, the European Union, by end of 2021. But we really need to wait and watch. Now, having said that, let me also say that America, which has also promised millions of doses, even that we've not seen that coming in, at least in this part of the world, to the tune of what President Biden has committed. We are yet to see those coming in as well.
Right. All right. Okay. Let's take this question from Ashish Singh on Twitter. Please tell us your view on the rationality of this step by the EU. So, is the EU being very irrational at a time when there should be more global cooperation on this front?
Well, the Europe has been trying to help as much as it can, but if you really compare as to how countries have been forthcoming with, being large-hearted or cooperation, we've seen that Europe has really lagged behind in this, right? They've not really so far stood by what was expected of them, which is why we saw External Affairs Minister Jaishankar when he was there for the G20 foreign ministers meeting last month. In fact, he met his counterpart, his European Union counterpart, Mr. Joseph Borrell, and he talked about the fact that how it is important for Europe to really come forward and now play the role. The fact that we are hearing all this vaccine apartheid and vaccine racialism coming in, vaccine sort of distribution that is not happening, they are really being talked about for a reason. And we are seeing how companies and countries, this big pharmaceutical European or American companies are they are making these vaccines, but these are also being cornered by the developed countries.
Right. Okay. This is a question from Ritika. Did India act sternly on this decision? What is the central government doing? So India has, in fact, as you mentioned, talked of reciprocal action.
Yes, beyond a point, what else can you do? These are difficult times. We all understand that. And when you talk about the fact that we are all in this together, then you really need to act like one, right? India is facing the brunt of why it exported so much, whereas there are countries who are sitting and giving their own citizens vaccines, but not giving it to the outside world. So, there has to be this unity that really needs to come down to the level where, common man will not be impacted due to lack of vaccines. Now, in India, we are seeing this lack of vaccines issue is happening for last 3 months now, 2-3 months. The European Union is very well aware of as to what is happening within India and in India's neighborhood. There were reports in the Nepali media the other day that Nepal, since it is not getting the remaining vaccines that it expected from India, it wanted to have some kind of bilateral mechanism with Europe, but Europe has refused. They've said that they can distribute the vaccines only through the COVAX.
Right. All right. Okay. This is a question from Tanveer Panjwani. Is it logical on part of the government of India to threaten EU about quarantine procedure, wherein EU has clarified that there was no application from India? Won't it affect India's foreign policy?
Well, it's not really that black and white, right? So you come up with a vaccine, you look at the supply chain management, you look at equal distribution, and then there are these several parallel sets of approval mechanisms coming in, right? Because the understanding initially was, as long as your vaccine is WHO approved, you can freely travel around the world. And that's what really has been the cornerstone of global trade as well. If you cannot allow free movement of individuals, professionals, tourists, then you're actually creating unseen barriers with this kind of several separate approval mechanisms. So I'm sure, I would not be aware as to whether Serum Institute was aware about this EMA approval separately over and above the WHO approval. But, that is something that maybe companies will now start to look at, that how many more approval bodies like this coming and come in, and we need to get our vaccines approved. But coming to the fact that whether it was a threat or not, I would not really think so, because vaccine diplomacy has now become a key cornerstone in your geopolitics, right? So it is not really a threat, it is about reciprocity. And that is fair, because, if you're not allowing Indian citizens or people who have taken Indian vaccines, and if you're not letting them travel to Europe, then you need to also understand that we also cannot let you move freely within the country. But I don't think that was a threat. It is just to make them understand that there is a reciprocity part there as well. And for the Chinese also, we are facing similar issues, but that's for a different discussion, I guess.
Right. All right. Okay. So, at a time, as you said, when vaccine diplomacy has become a buzzword, at a time when global cooperation is needed, the European Union's actions, the way it's approaching the pandemic, it seems to be a bit jarring. But let's hope this gets sorted out soon. Let's hope the Green Pass has all the vaccines that are being given, not just in India, but recognized vaccines across the world. We have more for you today at 5 p.m. We have a live discussion between our managing editor, YP Rajesh, and contributing editor and economist, Ela Patnaik. The question for this episode of Elanomics is whether Nirmala Sitharaman could have done more to stimulate the Indian economy. So do start sending in your questions for that as well. And don't forget to tune in at 5 p.m. today. Thank you. Have a good weekend. We'll be back on Monday with another episode of Government Matters. Thank you, Noenima, for being with us.
Thank you.